A few months back we investigated CPU core misconceptions, explaining how overall processor performance is affected not only by how many cores a CPU has, but other factors including cache levels and capacity. This was an interesting and unique look at Intel's 10th Gen series in an article we titled How CPU Cores and Cache Impact Gaming Performance. Basically what we did was compare the Core i9-10900K, Core i7-10700K and Core i5-10600K at the same 4.2 GHz frequency, with the same memory timings, ring bus frequency, and so on. Then compared the 3 CPUs with only 6 cores, / 12 threads enabled to see how much of a difference the L3 cache capacity made when it came to gaming performance. After that, we compared that data to the 10700K and 10900K with 8 cores enabled, and finally the 10900K with all of its 10 cores turned on. It turns out that in almost all games, it's not the core count, but the L3 cache capacity that is responsible for the improved performance seen across the higher-end Intel parts. Of course, down the track the extra cores will see those higher-end parts pull even further ahead, but at least on today's games it's all about the L3 cache. That investigation later morphed to a quad-core version where we included Core i3 models and a similar take for MCPUs where we looked at 10 years of MCPU progress and back to Intel for the same. To wrap up that content, we thought we should add the new Intel Alder Lake 12th Gen CPUs to the data pool, so here we are, and it's been a more involved process than we first imagined. Whereas all other CPU architectures had 1, 2, or maybe 3 different configurations, 12th Gen Core has 3 per CPU. For example, the 10th Gen CPUs had a 20 MB L3 cache with the Core i9 model, 16 MB for i7 and 12 MB for the i5 models. Alder Lake's cache capacity is segmented in a similar fashion, 20 MB of L3 for the Core i5, 25 MB for i7 and 30 MB for i9. But then on top of that we had to work out what kind of core configuration we should test. 4 P cores, 4 E cores, or a mixture of both? The correct answer was of course, all 3 configurations, and that's provided us with a wealth of juicy data to go over. To be clear, with 4 P cores enabled we were using hyper-threading, so this is a 4-core / 8-thread configuration. Basically SMT was enabled when supported for all test configurations. This means because the E cores don't support SMT, the 4 E core configuration was 4 cores with 4 threads. Then the mixed configuration, which featured 2 P cores with 2 E cores, was a 4-core / 6-thread configuration. For testing we've used the MCZ690 Tomahawk Wi-Fi DDR4 as we wanted to use the same DDR4-3200 low latency memory that was used to test all the other CPU architectures that support DDR4. In our testing, DDR5-6000 has not shown to be any faster for gaming, but most importantly we wanted to keep the data as apples to apples as possible for this feature. Finally, all configurations were tested using the Radeon RX 6900 XT. Let's dive into the data. Benchmarks. Starting with Rainbow Six Siege, there's quite a bit to go over, so bear with me. First let's just look at the Core i9-12900K, we see with 4 P cores enabled, and locked at 4.2 GHz, that this configuration was good for 510 Fs, just 3% faster than AMD's Zen 3 architecture. Then with 2 P cores and 2 E cores enabled, performance dropped by 15%, which is a fairly significant reduction, and then with just 4 E cores enabled performance drops by a further 12%, which isn't that much and not nearly the decline I was expecting. Quite shockingly, in this title 4 E cores were able to match the performance of the Core i9-11900K, though the 11th Gen architecture does suck in this title, but still I didn't expect to see any results like this. When comparing the various 12th Gen processors, we see that from the 12600K to the 12700K the additional L3 cache boosts performance by 4% with just the P cores enabled, or 7% with just the E cores. Then from the 12700K to the 12900K we're looking at a further 5% performance boost for the P cores and a rather substantial 10% boost for the E cores. If we compare all the data we have, we see that the 12th Gen CPUs with just their E cores enabled are comparable to Skylake as Intel claimed, at least when looking at the 12900K data. It's also interesting to note that with 2 P cores and 2 E cores, the 12900K was quite a bit slower than 4's Gen 3 cores. So this suggests that a part like the 5950X will end up being much faster than the 12900K for gaming, once games heavily utilize 16 cores. In like 10 years from now. Moving on to Battlefield B results, we gain a few interesting insights. First, is that the E cores suck big time in this title. Not only is the average frame rate almost halved when compared to what we see when just using the P cores, but the 1% low performance is shattered. We're looking at a 22% reduction in performance with the 12900K when going from 4 P cores to 2 P cores and 2 E cores. Then we see a further 31% reduction when moving to E cores exclusively. Worse, that means the P cores were 87% faster when looking at the average frame rate and 170% faster when looking at the 1% low. So those efficient cores are devastatingly slow in this game, and anything but efficient. We also see that when the E cores are enabled, the larger L3 cache capacity of the i7 and i9 models doesn't result in any extra performance, or at least very little in the way of extra performance. However, with just the P cores, the 12700K was 6% faster than the 12600K, and then the 12900K was 7% faster than the 12700K. Subscribe to our channel for more about tech.